Hello, welcome to the Den of the Grey Waste. I'm your host, Grey Waste Tim. Today we're looking at a short story from the Cthulhu Mythos called House of the Worm, written by Mearle Prout. Originally, I was planning to just do a simple read aloud of this the way I've been covering Zothic Legend Cycle, but as I was rereading the story, trying to find a voice for the characters, I realized the urge to talk symbolism and parallel was getting to be too much. So, hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks to everyone who showed up. Yeah, so the urge to talk symbolism and parallel was too great. So I decided I'd rather do a live stream on this and we'd read this out loud together so I could stop every so often and point out a few things. So the thing to note here is that when it comes to the mythos and how George R.R. Martin uses it in his Song of Ice and Fire, you got to remember George's. Oh, hey, Jenny. Hey, Carl. Gang's all here. So the thing to know about George is a writer who very much wears his influences on his sleeve, and they show up throughout A Song of Ice and Fire over and over and over again. He very much gives a lot of nods, tips of the hat, a lot of shout outs to other writers that have influenced him. This could be everyone from Lovecraft to Tolkien to Robert E. Howard to Clark Ashton Smith to Michael Moorcock, and even to some of his own modern day contemporaries. That would be Lynn Carter, who did Zothic Legend Cycle. The two, George R. R. Martin and Lynn Carter, were friends in life. Lynn Carter was one of his editors in the 70s and 80s. So they had a real working relationship. George also has been published alongside Brian Lumley, who does the Titus Crow series, which gives us Cthulhu, the daughter of Cthulhu. And that is one of the things that I'm gearing up towards in Guard It by Squishers. It's why I'm covering Zothic Legend Cycle first, because there are no, at least not from what I found, there are no audiobooks on Zothic Legend Cycle. Horror Babble, who I highly recommend for read aloud of Lovecraft tales. Dave's not here. Yeah, Dave is not here. This is me on my channel. This is me solo. I do that. I do appreciate Dave though, and maybe he'll pop in if he's awake. It's 1:00 out in Cali right now. Where was I? Oh yeah. So I highly recommend Horror Babble. They actually did do a read aloud of House of the Worm, the story I'm going to read now. So if you want just a simple audiobook version of that without a Song of Ice and Fire discussion, I do recommend them. In fact, I'll probably go back and update the video info to include a link to Horror Babble's reading. But they have not covered Zothic Legend Cycle. As far as I'm aware, I'm the first covering that. And I'm having a lot of fun reading those aloud. There's 5 main stories to that, plus a prequel story. So I'm going to do all 6. We got 2 done. But this one, again, I was going to read this one aloud, but I decided, no, we're going to live stream this one because there's a lot to take here, especially when it comes to the Weirwoods, the White Walkers, and the Long Night. So George R. R. Martin, if you've read his Not a Blog post, this is about from 10, 11 years ago, about fan fiction. George is not a fan of fan fiction written for his own world. But he did get his start writing fan fiction for things that he enjoyed growing up. And one of these is actually this story, House of the Worm. In George's Thousand Worlds series, he actually writes a spiritual sequel to this story, which is In the House of the Worm. And if you notice, like George, a lot of the mainstays in A Song of Ice and Fire are lifted from George's old writings. Things like A Song for Laia, Fever Dream, Night Flyers, The Ice Dragon, and the Thousand Worlds series. Like he is borrowing ideas from his older works, and then those older works are based off of ideas that he borrowed from his influencers and contemporaries. And House of the Worm is a big one. And I'm sure once we start reading the story, those of you who are here, like I'm sure most of my audience is here because of David Lightbringer, you know the drill when it comes to symbolism. it probably won't take so much prodding for me to be able to pull it out for everyone here to see, like when we start reading the story, exactly what George is lifting from. But again, it's something I want to talk about. It's something I want to read aloud. And also because it is going to influence later discussions when I get to the Guarded by Squisher things, when I talk about Theon as a parallel to the Star Spawn Zotha-Mog, which is the youngest son of Cthulhu. He is, and the Yugya, which are the giant white worms that run his caretaker prison. It relates a lot back to here, House of the Worm, and the influence that that has had on the Weirwoods, especially when the Weirwood roots and how often they are compared to worms, especially giant white grave worms. There's also Cthulhu's children, the Starspawn. They are mothered by Id-Ya, which is a creation by Lynn Carter. And Id-Ya is referred to as the worm that gnaws. And that is a title given to Bloodraven. If you go back to the to Mystery Night, the Duncan Egg Stories Mystery Night, the heretical Septon who's preaching all this blasphemy, the gods marked him with the mark of sin. Had a lot of fun reading that one out loud. But he refers to Bloodraven as the worm that gnaws, which is the exact title that Id-Ya has. There's also Lady Mysaria, who is the white worm. Essentially what Id-Ya is she is a giant Yugya, which are these white worms that bore through the earth, that bore through planet's crust. But Id-Ya is such a massive Yugya. She's such a gigantic one that she is at the point where she can bore through the center of entire stars and planets. She is the mother of the Starspawn. And the Starspawn, especially the two youngest, the youngest son, Zotha-Mog, and the daughter, Cthulhu, relate back to, they parallel Theon and Asha Greyjoy. And that is what I'm going to do, again, with Guarded by Squishers after we do the Zothic Legend cycle. But this is a part of that because Zotha-Mog and the Yugya is Theon, the White Worms, which is Theon in the Weirwoods. Theon in a caretaker prison of the North, guarded by Weirwoods, guarded by White Worms, guarded by Squishers. That's the setup for Theon as Zotha-Mog. So that's the setup for all this. So that going in on that, we can jump straight into the story. So House of the Worm by Mearle Prout. So this was first published in Weird Tales in October 1933. It was not intended to be a part of the Cthulhu mythos, but it ended up being lumped in with the mythos because of a number of shared themes. And what it is included in a collection of Lovecraftian tales, A Mountain Walked by S.T. Joshi. He is one of the definitive Lovecraft scholars out there. He wrote the biography on Lovecraft, I Am Providence, and he included House of the Worm in his collection of Lovecraft and Lovecraftian tales. So House of the Worm by Mearle Prout, a powerful story of a hideous blight that spread from an unholy forest and menaced mankind with destruction. And we open with a poem by Edgar Allan Poe. This is from The Conqueror Worm. But see amid the mimic rout a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that rides from out the scenic solitude. It rides with mortal pangs, the mimes become its food, and the angels sob at vermin fangs in human gore imbued. Edgar Allan Poe. When I cover Zothic Legend Cycle, after I'm done covering Zothic Legend Cycle, sorry, there was a split there. After I cover Zothic Legend Cycle, I do intend to read some more tales, stuff in the public domain. Edgar Allan Poe, Robert E. Howard. But yeah, I definitely want to get to Poe. Master of the Red Death is one that I want to read out loud for myself, because it does. That's another one that does have influence on Song of Ice and Fire in the form of Quaithe. I've talked about how Quaithe and the red lacquer mask that she wears, as well as the other shadow binders, it is a reference to Mask of the Red Death. The stranger shows up wearing a red death mask, and it's also a reference to the King in Yellow in that it's the pallid mask. It's a featureless mask. So Quaithe's red lacquer mask is a mix of the mask from Mask of the Red Death and the pallid mask from King in Yellow. Going back to the story. For hours, I had sat at my study table, trying in vain to feel and transmit to paper the sensations of a criminal in the death house. You know how one may strive for hours, even days, to attain a desired effect, and then feel a sudden swift rhythm and know he has found it? But how often, as though fate herself intervened, does interruption come and mar, if not cover completely, the road which for a moment gleamed straight and white? So it was with me. Scarcely had I lifted my hands to the keys when my fellow roomer, who had long been bent quietly over a magazine, said quietly enough, "That moon, I wonder if it even really exists." I turned sharply. Fred was standing at the window, looking with a singularly rapt attention into the darkness. Curious, I rose and went to him and followed his gaze into the night. Oh, and then here, I'll scroll back up. We can see the artwork that was included with Weird Tales for this particular short story. This is a scene that's going to come more near the end. Oh, and then the caption, "And the sounds, the cries to which they gave vent as our flaming torches smote full upon their sightless staring eyes." So line, again, we'll get to that later. Kind of feels a little bit too soon in the story for them to be showing this scene, but whatever. This is how Weird Tales decided to publish their magazine back in the 30s. There was the moon, a little past its full, but still nearly round, standing like a great red shield close above the treetops, yet real enough. Something in the strangeness of my friend's behavior prevented the irritation which his unfortunate interruption would ordinarily have caused. "Just why did you say that?" I asked after a moment's hesitation. Shamefacedly, he laughed, half apologetic. "I'm sorry I spoke aloud," he said. "I was only thinking of a bizarre theory I ran across in a story. Yeah, moon meteors. That's a bizarre theory I ran across reading some stories." Shout out to Dave right there. About the moon? No, just an ordinary ghost story of the type you write. While Pan Walks is its name, and there was nothing in it about the moon. He looked again at the ruddy globe, now lighting the darkened street below with a pale, tenuous light. Then he spoke. "You know, Art, that idea has taken hold of me. Perhaps there is something to it after all." Theories of the bizarre have always enthralled Fred, as they always hold a romantic appeal for me. And so, while he revolved his latest fancy in his mind, I waited expectantly. "Art," he began at last, "do you believe that old theory about thoughts becoming realities? I mean, thoughts of men having a physical manifestation." I reflected a moment before giving way to a slight chuckle. "Once," I answered, "a young man said to Carlyle that he had decided to accept the material world as a reality, to which the old man only replied, 'Egad, you'd better.'" "Yes," I continued, "I've often run across the theory, but—" "You've missed the point," was the quick rejoinder. "Accept your physical world, and what do you have? Something that was created by God. And how do we know that all creation has stopped? Perhaps even we—" He moved to a bookshelf, and in a moment returned, dusting off a thick old leather-bound volume. "I first encountered the idea here," he said, as he thumbed the yellow pages. But it was not until that bit of fiction pressed it into my mind that I thought of it seriously. Listen. The Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. From what did he create it? Obviously, it was created by thought, imagery, force of will, if you please. The Bible further says, so God created man in his own image. Does this not mean that man has all the attributes of the Almighty, only upon a smaller scale? Surely then, if the mind of God in its omnipotence could create the entire universe, the mind of man, being made in the image of God and being his counterpart on earth, could in the same way, if infinitely smaller in degree, create things of its own will. For example, the old gods of the dawn world. All right. So here we go right here. We're jumping straight into, you can see right here, George lifting some of these ideas, old gods of the dawn world. So we can relate this back to old gods, especially the ones worshipped in the north and up beyond the wall, and then the dawn world. So we're thinking like the dawn age. Who can say that they did not exist in reality, being created by man? And once created, how can we tell whether they will not develop into something to harass and destroy, beyond all control of their creators? If this be true, then the only way to destroy them is to cease to believe. Thus it is that the old gods died when man's faith turned from them to Christianity. So thinking on this is like, think of like the coming of the Andals, the expansion of the faith of the seven. The old gods die, they're replaced by new gods. This is a real life idea. Pagan gods are replaced by the Christian God as mass conversions happen, usually, sometimes by force, sometimes by persuasion. But then there's also this idea, like, once created, how can something not develop into something that harass and destroy? If the others are a creation, like if we follow the themes of the show, and if that's something that George decides to go through in the books, that the others are creation of the children of the forest, what happens when you lose control of your creation? It's very much a Frankenstein's monster idea. It's something we see with, again, on the show, possibly as a future in the books, White Walkers moving out of the control of children, and then becomes a sort of thing where Qyburn and Robert Strong, who is definitely a Frankenstein's monster, also a Lovecraft reanimator parallel. What happens when you lose control of that monster? And then the only way to destroy them is to cease to believe. The idea of the White Walkers is now in the era of myth. Some people believe, especially in the far, far north, beyond the north still believes. That is possibly why Torrance Stark knelt to Aegon the Conqueror in the Aegon's prophecy. If the idea of White Walkers is still, as a legitimate threat, is still an accepted view in the north, and then beyond the wall, well, they know the White Walkers are real. But going south of the neck, White Walkers are just a story. They're grumpkins, they're snarks, they're make-believe boogeymen. The only way to destroy it, when you cease to believe in something, you essentially destroy it. Because it's no longer at the focal point of your mind. It's no longer a threat. Although here it is a threat, and the same idea is something that will crop up here in this story. So he was silent a moment, watching me as I stood musing. Strange where such thoughts can lead. A person, I said, how are we to know which things are real and which are fancies? Racial fantasies, I mean, common in all of us. I think I see what you meant when you wondered if the moon were real. But imagine, said my companion, a group of people, a cult, all thinking the same thoughts, worshipping the same imaginary figure. What might not happen if their fanaticism were such that they thought and felt deeply? A physical manifestation, alien to those who did not believe. Aliens! And so the discussion continued, and when at last we finally slept, The moon, which prompted it all, was hovering near the zenith, sending its cold rays upon a world of hard physical reality. Next morning, we both arose early. Fred to go back to his prosaic work as a bank clerk, I to place myself belatedly before my typewriter. After the diversion of the night before, I found that I was able to work out the bothersome scene with little difficulty, and that evening I mailed the finished and revised manuscript. Come on, George, do this with the winds of winter. Finish the manuscript, mail it to your publishers. When my friend came in, he spoke calmly of our conversation the night before, even admitting that he had come to consider the theory a rank bit of metaphysics. Not quite so calmly did he speak of the hunting trip which he suggested. Romantic fellow that he was, his job at the bank was sheer drudgery, and any escape was rare good fortune. I, too, with my work out of the way and my mind clear, was doubly delighted at the prospect. I'd like to shoot some squirrels, I agreed. And I know a good place. Can you leave tomorrow? Yes, tomorrow. My vacation starts then, he replied. But for a long time, I've been wanting to go back to my old stamping grounds. It's not so very far, only a little over 100 miles, and he looked at me in apology for differing with my plans. In Sacrament Wood, there are more squirrels than you ever saw. And so it was agreed. Sacrament Wood is an anomaly. 3 or 4 miles wide and twice as long, it fills the whole of a peculiar valley, a rift, as it were, in the rugged topography of the higher Ozarks. No stream flows through it. There is nothing suggesting a normal valley. It is merely there, by sheer physical presence defying all questions. Grim, tree-flecked mountains hem it on every side, as though seeking by their own ruggedness to compensate this spot of gentleness and serenity. And here lies the peculiarity, though. Here lies the peculiarity. See, you can tell when I'm doing Zothic Legend Cycle, when I'm not reading live, I can go back and redo those takes where I flub a word. But we're doing this live, so you're going to hear all my mispronunciations. Though the mountains around are all inhabited, sparsely, of course, through necessity, the Valley of the Wood, with every indication of a wonderful fertility, has never felt the plow, and the tall, smooth forest of scented oak has never known the axe of the woodman. I, too, had known Sacrament Wood. It was generally recognized as a sportsman's paradise, and twice, long before, I had hunted there. But that was so long ago that I had all but forgotten, and now I was truly grateful to have been reminded of it again. For if there is a single place in the world where squirrels grow faster than they can be shot, it is Sacrament Wood. It was mid-afternoon when we finally wound up the last mountain trail to stop at last in a small clearing. A tiny shanty with clapboard roof stood as ornament beside the road, and behind it a bent figure in faded overalls was chopping the withered stalks of cotton. That would be old Zeke, confided my companion, his eyes shining with even this reminder of childhood. Hello, he shouted, stepping to the ground. The old mountaineer straightened and wrinkled his face in recognition. He stood thus a moment until my companion inquired as to the hunting. Then his eyes grew dull again. He shook his head dumbly. Ain't no hunting now, boys. Everything's dead. Sacrament Wood is dead. Dead, I cried. Impossible. Why is it dead? I knew in a moment that I had spoken without tact. The mountaineer has no information to give one who expresses a desire for it, much less an outlander who shows incredulity. The old man turned back to his work. Ain't no hunting now, he repeated, and fiercely attacked a stalk of cotton. So obviously dismissed, we could not remain longer. Old Zeke has lived too long alone, confided Art as we moved away. All mountaineers get that way sooner or later. But I could see that his trip was already half spoiled, and even fancied he was nettled with me for my unfortunate interruption. Still, he said nothing, except to note that Sacrament Wood was our next valley. Excuse me. We continued. The road stretched ahead for some distance along the level top, And then as we started the rough descent, Sacrament Wood burst full upon our view, cloth as I had never before seen it. Bright red, yellow, and brown mingled together in splashes of beauty as the massive trees put on their autumnal dress. Almost miniature appeared to us from our lookout, shimmering like a mountain lake in the dry heat of early fall. Why, as we gazed for a moment silently, did a vague thought of uncleanness make a shudder pass through my body. Was I sensitive to the ominous words of the old mountaineer? Or did my heart tell me that what my mind could not, that the season was yet too early to destroy every trace of greenery and replace it with the colors of death? Or was it something else, something not appealing to the senses, nor yet to the intellect, but yet sending a message too strong to be dismissed? But I did not choose to dwell long upon the subject. The human mind, I have long known, in striving to present a logical sequence of events, often strains the fabric of fact for the sake of smoothness. Perhaps I really felt nothing, and my present conceptions have been altered by subsequent events. At any rate, Fred, although unnaturally pale, said nothing, and we continued the descent in silence. Night comes early in the deep valley of Sacrament Wood. The sun was just resting on the high peak in the west as we entered the forest and struck camp. But long after comparative darkness had come over us, the mountain down which we had come was illuminated a soft gold. We sat over our pipes in the gathering dusk. It was deeply peaceful there in the darkening wood, and yet Fred and I were unnaturally silent, perhaps having the same thoughts. Why were the massive trees so early shorn of leaves? Why had the very birds ceased to sing? Whence came the faint yet unmistakable odor of rottenness? A cheery fire soon dispelled our fears. We were again the two hunters, rejoicing in our freedom and our anticipation. At least I was. Fred, however, somewhat overcame my feeling of security. Aught, whatever the cause, we must admit that Sacrament Wood is dead. Why, man, those trees are not getting ready for dormants. They are dead. Why haven't we heard birds? Blue jays used to keep this place in a continual uproar. And where did I get the feeling I had as we entered here? Art, I am sensitive to these things. I can feel a graveyard in the darkest night. And that is how I felt as I came here, as if I was entering a graveyard. I know, I tell you. I felt it too, I answered, and the odor too. But all that is gone now. The fire changes things. Yes, the fire changes things. Hear that moaning in the trees? You think that is the wind? Well, you're wrong, I tell you. That is not the wind. Something not human is suffering. Maybe the fire hurts it. I laughed, uncomfortably enough. Come, I said, you'll be giving me the jimmies too. I felt the same way you did. I even smelt the odor. But the old man just had us upset. That's all. The fire has changed things. It's all right now. Yes, he said. It's all right now. So yeah, spooky dead. Yes, spooky dead trees with fiery red leaves. Yep, exactly. Okay, so yeah, where the forest is dead. It's dead in a season too early. It's like winter just came out of nowhere, right? Which is what's the theme of Song of Ice and Fire? We're stuck in times of perpetual summer that turn into perpetual winter. The normal season cycle does not exist. You can go from years of summer to years of winter with only a slight feeling of autumn and spring, and you never know when they're going to come. But here, the forest is dead. It's dead like winter has come, and it's too early in the season. And they said, there's no birds singing. There's no squirrels there's no squirrels running around for them to shoot. There's no signs of life. It's like we we've entered the haunted forest, essentially. There's nothing. It's eerie. There's nothing going on. But then the fire changes things, at least in their mind. Whatever is out there lurking in these woods, the fire seems to be keeping it away. And that is another theme we get to the Song of Ice and Fire. Like the White Walkers, they don't like fire, they don't like salt, they don't like iron. Fire is a very good way to kill whites. Fire may not have as much an effect on true others, but dragon fire might, unless of course they go the route of the show when Night's King was seemingly unaffected. But that's neither here or there. That's depending on how George wants to take the story. But the underlying themes are there: the creepy haunted forest, the death in the air, the fact that this is out of place, out of season, and all the signs of life are just gone. For all his nervousness, Fred was the first to sleep that night. We heaped the fire high before turning in, and I lay for a long while and watched the leaping flames, and I thought about the fire. Fire is clean, I said to myself as though directed from without. Fire is clean. Fire is life. The very life of our bodies is preserved by oxidation. Yes, without fire there would be no cleanness in the world. The fire cleanses. And that's almost very much a lorist idea. The fire will return everything to as it was. The fire. But I too must have dropped off, for when I was awakened by a low moan, the fire was dead. The wood was quiet. Not a whisper or rustle of leaves disturbed the heavy stillness of the night. And then I sensed the odor. Once sensed, it grew and grew until the air seemed heavy, even massive with the inertia of it, seemed to press itself into the ground through sheer weight. It eddied and swirled in sickening waves of smell. It was the odor of death and putridity. I heard another moan. Fred, I called, my voice catching in my throat. The only answer was a deeper moan. I grasped his arm, and my fingers sank in the bloated flesh as into a rotting corpse. The skin burst like an overripe berry, and slime flowed over my hands and dripped from my fingers. Overcome with horror, I struck a light, and under the tiny flare I saw for a moment his face. Purple, bloated, the crawling flesh nearly covered his staring eyes. White worms swarmed his puffed body, exuded squirming from his nostrils, and fell upon his livid lips. The foul stench grew stronger. So thick was it that my tortured lungs cried out for relief. Then, with a shriek of terror, I cast the lighted match from me and threw myself into the bed and buried my face in the pillow. How long I lay there, sick, trembling, overcome with nausea, I do not know. But I slowly became aware of a rushing sound in the treetops. Great limbs creaked and groaned. The trunks themselves seemed to crack in agony. I looked up and saw a ruddy light reflected about us, and like a crash of thunder came the thought into my brain. Fire is clean. Fire is life. Without fire, there would be no cleanness in the world. And at this command I arose and grasped everything within reach and cast it upon the dying flames. Was I mistaken, or was the odor of death really less? I hauled wood and heaped the fire high. Fortunate indeed that the match I had thrown had fallen in the already sere leaves. When next I thought of my companion, the roaring blaze was leaping 15 feet in air. Slowly I turned, expecting to see a corpse weltering in a miasma of filth, and saw a man calmly sleeping. His face was flushed, his hand still slightly swollen, but he was clean. He breathed. Could I asked, have dreamt of death and of the odor of death? Could I have dreamt the worms? I awoke him and waited. He half looked at me, and then gazing at the fire, gave a cry of ecstasy. A light of bliss shone for a moment in his eyes, as in a young child first staring at the mystery of cleansing flame. And then, as realization came, this too faded into a look of terror and loathing. "The worms!" he cried. "The maggots! The odor came, and with it the worms! And I awoke just as the fire died. I couldn't move. I couldn't cry out. The worms came. I don't know whence. From nowhere, perhaps. They came, and they crawled, and they ate. And the smell came with them. It just appeared, as did the worms, from out of thin air. It just became, then, death. I died, I tell you. I rotted in the worms, the maggots they ate. I am dead, I say, dead, or should be." He covered his face with his hands. Now this makes me... this is House of the Worm by Mearle Prout. Okay, 1933 Weird Tale story. This isn't George's In the House of the Worm. This is the story that is a spiritual sequel to. But anyway, so this scene with Fred, right? Fred's awakening from this dreamlike state that he had died. And it brings to mind, like, what is John going to say when he's resurrected? Like, what are the first words that you say when you've been brought back from death? Do you realize that you've been dead? Do you feel anything? It's a good question. It's something that perhaps it's a question of that Beric Dondarrion may have had the first time he was brought back, and now he's been brought back so many times up until he gives the final kiss of life to Catelyn Stark to raise her as Lady Stoneheart. What is it that you say? Like when you come back from death, that's probably, I would imagine, going to leave an imprint on your mind where you had been and what had happened in the time that you were away, to know that you were dead or that you should be dead. How we lived out the night without going mad, I do not know. All through the long hours, we kept the fire burning high, and all through the night, the lofty trees moaned back their mortal agony. The rotting death did not return. In some strange way, the fire kept us clean of it and fought it back. But our brains felt and dimly comprehended the noisome evil floundering in the darkness and the pain which our immunity gave this devilish forest. I could not understand why Fred had so easily fallen a victim to the death while I remained whole. He tried to explain that his brain was more receptive, more sensitive. Sensitive to what? I asked, but he did not know. Dawn came at last, sweeping westward before it the web of darkness. From across the forest and around us on all sides, the giant trees rustled in pain, suggesting the gnashing of millions of anguished teeth. All right, right there. So there, we got some Weirwood imagery, right? The forest is rustling in pain, millions of gnashing of anguished teeth. You think the faces carved into the Weirwoods. Aside from the Night of the Laughing Tree, most of them never look happy, right? Most Weirwood carved faces look like they're in some sort of agony or anger or sadness or something. And over the ridge to eastward came the smiling sun, lighting with holy clarity the branches of our wood. Never was a day so long in coming, and never so welcome its arrival. So a day so long in coming, that would be the day that follows the long night. In a half hour, our belongings were gathered, and we quickly drove to the open road. Fred, you remember our conversation a couple evenings ago? I asked my companion after some time of silence. I'm wondering whether that couldn't apply here. Meaning that we were the victims of hallucination? And how do you account for this? He raised his sleeve above his elbow, showing his arm. How well did I remember it? For there, under curling skin and red as a brand, was the print of my hand. I sensed, not felt, you gripped me last night, said Fred. There is our evidence. Yes, I answered slowly. We've got lots to think of, you and I. All right, so it's like the forest drugged them. And we've seen that in Song of Ice and Fire. Weirwood paste and Shade of the Evening. These are like psychotropic drugs that come from forests, that come from these haunted forests, because Weirwoods and Shade of the Evening trees are both like haunted trees and they give visions. So they are hallucinogenic drugs of the forest. And we have the same idea here. Fred and Art, their hallucinations from last night, their weird dreams, their nightmares really are brought on by this forest of death. When we reached home, it was not yet noon, but the brightness of the day had already wrought wonders with our perspective. I think that the limitation of the human mind, far from being a curse, is the most merciful thing in the world. We live on a quiet, sheltered island of ignorance. And from the single current flowing by our shores, we visualize the vastness of the black seas around us and see simplicity and safety. And yet, if only a portion of the cross currents and whirling vortexes of mystery and chaos could be revealed to our consciousness, we should immediately go insane. And this is one of the central ideas behind the whole Cthulhu mythos, is to view Cthulhu, to view Hastur, to view these eldritch abominations, these things that are worshipped as gods, to actually see them is to invite madness. And that is a theme that goes on a Song of Ice and Fire. Like George has said himself, we're never going to see literal gods on page, right? But we do feel the presence of otherworldly forces at play. And there are characters who may peer past that veil and see what really goes on. I've talked about Euron Greyjoy being one of these people. I think he will be mind melted before becoming a Night's King figure. Same with Jon. Jon, if he is body snatched by the others, the influence that will have on him could bring him back when he is resurrected in human form, being one of the things that turns his personality. The idea that Jon is going to come back more wolfish, he's going to come back more feral. It's the second coming of Jesus, right? Jesus is coming back and he ain't going to be happy. It's the same with Jon. When Jon comes back, Jon's probably going to be pissed. And a portion of that could be the things that and he was off on that other side, off the mortal coil, the time that he was dead. Again, those are things that it's going to have an effect on you. Euron, for his part, seems to be like the Lovecraftian character, the one who reaches too high, who bites off more than he can chew, and immediately gets steamrolled by otherworldly forces. It happens to all these Lovecraftian characters. Obed Marsh makes the pact with the Deep Ones. That goes south. Nephrin Ka, the Black Pharaoh, casts down the gods of Egypt to worship the Black Stone. That doesn't go in his favor. That sucks. He doesn't have a happy ending. And George borrows that idea with the idea of the Bloodstone Emperor and Night's King. These guys, they grasp for higher glory. They start to tread off of the realm of man into the realm of gods. And what happens? They are cast down because of it. You are not meant to walk in those footsteps. You are not meant to reach for that higher level. You're not meant to travel to that plane of existence. It is not for man. But Euron is someone who is reaching for it. And reaching for it is more than likely going to be the thing that causes his fall. You can't grasp it. Or you try and something plucks your fingers and says nope and smacks you back down. But can we not see? When a single cross current upsets the calm placidness of the visible sea, we refuse to believe. Our minds balk and cannot understand, and thus we arrive at that strange paradox. After an experience of comprehensible terror, the mind and body remain long upset. Yet even the most terrible encounters with things unknown fade in insignificance in the light of clear day. We were soon about the prosaic task of preparing lunch to satisfy seemingly insatiable appetites. And yet we by no means forgot. The wound on Fred's arm healed quickly. In a week, not even a scar remained. But we were changed. We had seen the cross current, and we knew. By daylight, a swift recollection often brought nausea, and the nights, even with the lights left burning, were rife with horror. For the night is long and filled with terror. Our very lives seemed bound to the events of one night. Yet even so, I was not prepared for the shock I felt when, one night nearly a month later, Fred burst into the room, his face livid. "Read this," he said in a husky whisper, and extended a crumpled newspaper to my hand. I reached for it, read where he had pointed. "Mountaineer dies. Ezekiel Whipple, lone mountaineer, age 64, was found dead in his cabin yesterday by neighbors. The post-mortem revealed a terrible state of putrefaction. Medical men aver that death could not have occurred less than 2 weeks ago. The examination by the coroner revealed no sign of foul play, yet local forces for law and order are working upon what may yet be a valuable clue. Jesse Layton, a near neighbor and close friend of the aged bachelor, states that he visited and held conversation with him the day preceding, and it is upon this statement that anticipation of possible arrest is based." All right. So, according to the story and the coroners, he had to have, based on the state of rot and putrefaction of his body, he had to have been dead for at least 2 weeks. And yet the neighbor says that he had just spoken with him the day prior. So the forest is dead. The odor, the stench, the forest is dying, and now the putrefaction that is spreading now here, and it happens with the mountaineer here. His body is decomposing way, way, way faster than it should have. In one night, it looks like he's been dead for weeks. "God," I cried. "Does it mean?" "Yes. It's spreading, whatever it is. It's reaching out, crawling over the mountains. God knows to where it may finally extend." "It's coming from the wood," I said. "It's in the wood. It centers in the wood. It must be a terrible new disease. But yes, God only knows to where it may finally extend. No, it is not a disease. It is alive. It's alive, Art. I tell you, I felt it. I heard it. I think it tried to talk to me." All right, so here, let's... Weirwood net, right? And the idea that the others are spirits of the trees pushed out. It's alive. It's not a disease. Something is coming from the woods. It's bringing death with it. But it's also trying to communicate. And yeah, this is like, if we go back again, I'm building on David Lightbringer ideas here. That the White Walkers are forced out of the Weirwood net and they want to get back, and these are spirits left without a home, right? And this is where we're seeing this idea in this very early weird tale. Like the forest is something in the forest is alive, and yet it's bringing death. For us, there was no sleep that night. Every moment of our half-forgotten experience was relived 1,000 times, every horror amplified by the darkness in our fears. Excuse me, I just need to... We wanted to flee to some far country, to leave far behind us the terror we had felt. We wanted to stay and fight to destroy the destroyer. We wanted to plan, but hateful thought, how could we plan to fight nothing? We were as helpless as the old mountaineer. And so, torn by these conflicting desires, we did what was to be expected. Precisely nothing. We might even have slipped back into the even tenor of our lives had not news dispatches showed still further spread, and more death. Eventually, of course, we told our story. The lowered glances and obvious embarrassment told us too well how little we were believed. Indeed, who could expect normal people with normal experiences to believe the obviously impossible? And so, to save ourselves, we talked no more, but watched in dread from the sidelines the slow, implacable growth. It was midwinter before the first town fell in the way of the expanding circle. Only a mountain village of 100 inhabitants, but the death came upon them one cold winter night, late at night, for there were no escapees, and smothered all in their beds. And when the next day visitors found and reported them, there was described the same terrible advanced state of putrefaction that had been present in all the other cases. Then the world, apathetic always, began to believe. Dude, reading this in modern times, like it's almost like, man, we're here, right? We've seen this before. In the last 3 years, this has been it. Apathy leads way as a what is very obviously this death is sprawling, but not until it reaches you, not until it reaches your home and your comfort, right? Does all of a sudden it become a problem. But even so, they sought the easiest, the most natural explanation, and refused to recognize the possibilities we half outlined to them. Some new plague, they said, is threatening us, is ravaging our hill country. We will move away. A few moved. But the optimists, trusting all the physicians, stayed on, and we, scarce knowing why, stayed on with them. All right, so if we can relate this back to Song of Ice and Fire, this is almost like to trust in the word of doctors, right? But in the world of Ice and Fire, the idea is to trust in the word of maesters, to trust in the words of learned men, even though the real culprit is something supernatural and something magical, something abnormal. But the Citadel, the maesters, are trying to create a world without magic. That is, again, why things like the others are forced into the background as myth and folklore. And why the wildlings, the free folk trying to make their way south, is not seen as the refugee crisis that it really is, of people running away from icy demons and monsters, but people just trying to flee south, and they're looked upon as invaders here. Yes, the world was waking to the danger. The plague became one of the most popular topics of conversation. Revivalists predicted the end of the world, and the physicians, as usual, set to work. Doctors swarmed the infected district, in fear of personal safety, examined the swollen corpses, and found the bacteria of decay and the worms. They warned the natives to leave the surrounding country, and then, to avoid panic, they added encouragement. "We have an inkling of the truth," they said, after the best manner of the detective agency. "It is hoped that we may soon isolate the deadly bacterium and produce an immunizing serum." And the world believed. I, too, half believed, and even dared to hope. "It is a plague," I said. "Some strange new plague that is killing the country. We were there, first of all." "But no," said Fred. "It is not a plague. I was there. I felt it. It talked to me. It is black magic, I tell you. What we need is not medicine, but medicine men." And I half believed him, too. Spring came, and the encroaching menace had expanded to a circle 10 miles in radius, with a point in the wood as a center. Slow enough to be sure, but seemingly irresistible. The quiet, lethal march of the disease, the death as it was called, still remained a mystery and a fear. And as week after week fled by with no good tidings from the physicians and men of science there assembled, my doubts grew stronger. Why? I asked. If it were a plague, did it never strike its victims during the day? What disease could strike down all life alike, whether animal or vegetable? It was not a plague, I decided. At least I added, clutching the last thread of hope. Not a normal plague. All right, so if we relate this to White Walkers, White Walkers only come in the night. They never are seen during the day. That is why the sun and dawn is such a comfort in the far north. But that is also why it's the long night, because the others travel by night. They have that vampire motive going for them. And here, just as Art and Fred are pointing out, like, yeah, this is a plague, but what disease can, if it's a disease, what causes its victims to only die at night? Like, you know, if you're afflicted with a disease, you're going to die any time of the day. You could die in your sleep. You could keel over at noon. You could keel over at 4 in the afternoon. Like right now, it's 5 o'clock on the East Coast. I could, if I had a deadly disease or like a horrible case of that which YouTube won't allow you to name, I could keel over right in this chair right in front of you. You wouldn't know. But no, it's only happening at night. Fred, I said one day, they can't stand fire if you were right. This is your chance to prove that you were right. We'll burn the wood. We'll take kerosene. We'll burn the wood, and if you were right, the thing will die. His face brightened. Yes, he said, we'll burn the wood, and the thing will die. Fire saved me. I know it. You know it. Fire could never cure a disease. It could never... Okay, so, all right, that just made me think of Victarion. Fire can... But, because Victarion and his snazzy new firearm, right? That is, but that is an affection. That is an affected cut. The Maester's the Maester's work is not healing Victarion's arm, but what cured it? Cured it. Fire. Fire cured it. Fire from a fire priest, from a priest of Valor. Fire cleansed and made Victarion whole again. And this is an idea that can be seen in, again, A Song of Ice and Fire. How do we cleanse the weird? How do we smite the others? How do we defeat the others? Well, at first, the answer is going to be it really is going to be reconciliation at the very end of things. The others want something. There is some kind of pact that has long since been abandoned, been forgotten, a broken promise, broken treaty, that type of thing. But humanity isn't going to know that at first. Humanity, in its way of fighting monsters, is first going to go with the idea of we need to fight with sword and steel and fire, because that is how we deal with things that we don't understand. Like, oh, we'll kill it, and it all goes away. So, burning of the forest, burning of the others, burning of Weirwoods, especially, something that we've seen. We see R'hllor see that. Melisandre burns the wooden idols of the Faith of the Seven. She burns Weirwoods, the free folk, in order to pass through the wall. Some of them adopt R'hllor-ism, and they throw a Weirwood branch into the fire. Fire cleanses. So fire is going to be in the beginning when the fight is taken to the others, or the others bring the fight, whichever way it happens. Fire, steel, sword, those are going to be the mechanisms through which humanity at first will begin dealing with the others, until they realize, like, well, this ain't working. Because they'll just bring back all our dead and make a whole new army, and we're back to square one. So we said, and so we believed, and we set to work. 4 barrels of kerosene we took, and tapers and torches. And on a clear, cold day in early March, we set out in the truck. The wind snapped bitterly out of the north. Our hands grew blue with chill in the open cab. But it was a clean cold. Before its pure sharpness, it was almost impossible to believe that we were heading toward filth and a barren country of death. And still, low in the east, the sun sent its bright yellow shafts over the already budding trees. It was still early in the morning when we arrived at the edge of the slowly enlarging circle of death. Here the last victim, only a day or so earlier, had met his end. Yet, even without this last to tell us of its nearness, we could have judged by the absence of all life. The tiny buds we had noted earlier were absent. The trees remained dry and cold as in the dead of winter. Why did not the people of the region heed the warnings and move? True, most of them have done so, but a few old mountaineers remained and died one by one. All right, so yeah, that's another thing that's true to life, right? Think about tornado warnings or hurricane warnings and how many people stuck in their ways are just like, oh, I ain't moving. I lived here for 55 dang years. I ain't leaving. And people will risk that. They will risk the storm. They will risk the plague. They will risk whatever comes by instead of uprooting from their homes, whether it be out of stubbornness or whether it be because they had absolutely no other means. It's a thing that happens. We drove on up the rocky, precipitous trail, leaving the bustle and safety of the normal world behind us. Was I wrong in thinking a shade had come over the sun? Were not things a trifle darker? Ooh, there's some long night imagery. Still I drove on in silence. A faint stench assailed my nostrils, the odor of death. It grew and it grew. Fred was pale, and for that matter, so was I. Pale and weak. We'll light a torch, I said. Perhaps this odor will die. We lit a torch in the brightness of the day, then drove on. You know, it's not a sentinella candle, you know, but okay. Once we passed a pigsty, white bones lay under the sun. The flesh was decayed and eaten away entirely. What terror had killed them while they slept? I could not now be mistaken. The shade was deepening. The sun was still bright, but weak in some strange way. It shone doubtfully, vacillating, as if there were a partial eclipse. Okay, right. So the sun's still there, but it's becoming darker. It's like it's fading. It's getting phased out, like an eclipse is taking hold. So yeah, so some long night imagery. We could think too of places like Ashai and Stagai where there isn't much light. Stagai gets an hour of sunlight a day. Otherwise, it's completely shrouded in shadow. Ashai is a place where the sun shines longer than it does in Stagai, but you wouldn't really know it because of the oily black stone buildings that drink the light. So you're getting sun, but you don't really feel it. It's more like it's almost like being stuck under fluorescent lighting. It's that cold artificial feel, right, of something mimicking natural light. But it's not. It's the feeling I have now because I'm sitting in a windowless room. All of the lights are coming from the computer screen and the ring light. There is no natural light, right, in this. No natural light at all in this room that I'm in. So but if you're stuck in only that's the only light that you can see because you're never getting real sun. It's foreboding, and it can it fucks with you. It really does. I could never if you were stuck in a Walmart, right? Trapped in a Walmart or under fluorescent lighting 24 hours a day. But the valley was near. We passed the last mountain, past the fallen cabin of the mountaineer who was the first to die. We started the descent. Sacrament Wood lay below us, not fresh and green as I had seen it first years before, nor yet flashing with color as on our last trip the autumn before. It was cold and obscured. A black cloud lay over it, a blanket of darkness, a rolling mist like that which is said to obscure the river Styx. So yeah, haunted forest, dead forest, and black cloud and mist. And how do the others come? Well, they travel. When it's not night and they're out in full form, then they're traveling in mist. It covered the region of death like a heavy shroud and hid it from our probing eyes. Could I have been mistaken, or did I hear a broad whisper rising from the unhallowed wood of the holy name? Or did I feel something I could not hear? All right, so yeah, like the trees are whispering. It's another theme we see. Like Theon thinks he hears his voice, and it's coming from Bran. It's Bran looking through the weirwood trees and seeing him. He says Theon, and Theon, for his part, feels like he heard something call his name. In the show, when Bran looks back at the Tower of Joy and has the vision of Ned, he calls him out, and Ned looks off as if he heard a voice. The Three-Eyed Crow, so Brendan Rivers, Bloodraven for our part in the books, in the show version of him tells him, like, you can't change the past. And book version says the same thing, but at least in this show idea, like, no, maybe that's not quite true. Maybe things can pierce through and we can hear things. We see it with Theon, and we partly see it semi-canonically, show only, in Ned looking back and to something that he may or may not have heard. It covered the region of death like a heavy shroud and hid from our... I read this paragraph, sorry. Okay. But in one respect, I could not be wrong. It was growing dark. The farther we moved down the rocky trail, the deeper we descended into the stronghold of death. The paler became the sun, the more obscured our passage. Fred, I said in a low voice, they are hiding the sun. They're destroying the light. The wood... I feel like I don't even have to point it out, right? They're hiding the sun. They're destroying the light. The wood will be dark. To create a long night would require to block out the sun. Hide the sun. Destroy the light. The woods will be dark. Yes, he answered. The light hurts them. I could feel their pain and agony that morning as the sun rose. They cannot kill in the day. But now they are stronger and are hiding the sun itself. The light hurts them, and they are destroying it. We lit another torch and drove on. When we reached the wood, the darkness had deepened. The almost palpable murk had thickened until the night had become as a moonlit... Okay, sorry, I fucked up that sentence. Let's start that over again. Again, maybe I should add bloopers to Zothic Legend Cycle, and you can hear me go holy run-on sentence every time I screw up, and I have to treat periods like commas, treat commas like periods because of that Lovecraftian prose, just to catch my breath. All right, do over. When we reached the wood, the darkness had deepened. The almost palpable murk had thickened until the day had become as a moonlit night. But it was not a silver night. The sun was red as blood, shining on the accursed forest. All right. So there's some red comet imagery, and there is also some blood eye imagery, right? And this is something I've talked about during the Ironborn streams that I did with Dave when we read Iron Captain, Drowned Man, and the Reaver, Euron's blood eye, and the Red Comet, and how I've talked about that being a stand-in for Aldebaran. And here's the same idea. The sun is red as blood. Because the sun, if the sun were to die, right, the sun going through its natural life cycle, it will eventually turn into a red. It will eventually turn into a red giant. Aldebaran is a red giant, and stars turn into red giants as they are nearing the end of their life cycle. So, the sun being red is a symbolic way of saying the sun is dying, a natural star death. Great red things surrounded it, like the red rings of sleeplessness surrounding a diseased eye. No, the sun itself was not clean. It was weak, diseased, powerless as ourselves before the new terror. Its red glow mingled with the crimson of the torches and lit up the scene around us with the color of blood. We drove as far as solid ground would permit our passage, barely to the edge of the forest, where the wiry, scraggly growth of cedar and blackjack gave place to the heavy growth of taller, straighter oak. Then we abandoned our conveyance and stepped upon the rotting earth. And at this, more strongly it seemed than before, the stench of rottenness came over us. We were thankful that all animal matter had decayed entirely. There only remained the acrid, penetrating odor of decaying plants, disagreeable and powerfully suggestive to our already sharpened nerves, but endurable. And it was warm there in the death-ridden floor of the valley. In spite of the season of the year and the absence of the sun's warmth, it was not cold. The heat of decay, of fermentation, overcame the biting winds, which occasionally swept down from the surrounding hills. The trees were dead. Not only dead, they were rotten. Great limbs had crashed to the ground and littered the soggy floor. All smaller branches were gone, but the trees themselves remained upright, their naked limbs stretched like supplicating arms to the heavens as these martyrs of the woods stood waiting. Yet even in these massive trunks, the worms crawled and ate. It was a forest of death, a nightmare fungus forest that cried out to the invaders, that sobbed in agony at the bright torches, and rocked to and fro in all its unholy rottenness. And comparing this back to Song of Ice and Fire, the imagery of weirwood trees, their branches reaching out towards the heavens, that's one we get numerous times. But the weirwoods are also comparable to a fungus. They don't act like normal trees. They don't seem to grow like normal trees. Their root network, while trees definitely do have an underground root network that can send signals, the weirwoods operate more as a fungus. They are like a cross between a fungus and a tree. And this is George drawing upon things like the fungi from Yuggoth from Lovecraft, but also here. And this is because the worms are becoming one with the forest, but by doing so, they are killing it. Just as in, if we think of the story of Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood net, he is becoming one with the forest, right? But the effect it has is that it essentially kills it. It pushes out the old spirits, the spirits of the others, spirits of the children. It no longer serves its original purpose. It has been stolen. It has been supplanted by this foreign invader, this sort of disease. Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood net is like a disease attacking the Weirwoods. And that could be the thing that causes the shift in Weirwoods from to Shade of the Evening. One idea that has been flown around, one theory I like actually, is that the idea of the Hammer of the Waters is a severing of the Weirwood net connection. All of these roots that run deep underground, all throughout Song of Ice, all throughout Westeros. It's like underground tunnels run from Frostfangs down the Dorne, right? If there's a severing of the Weirwood connection, like the trees just snap the roots off, giant underground subterranean earthquake like that could be the thing that causes a massive earthquake strong enough to break the arm of Dorne. And also could be the thing that makes it why Shade of the Evening trees are so different from have so many similarities from Weirwoods, but are so different. If they are diseased trees, or at least something that similar to Weirwoods, just like a different species, but from the same sort of plant family type deal. But yeah, a severing of the Weirwood connection. But again, The Weirwood tree connection also has a lot of fungus symbolism. And it's why Weirwood paste is probably not really Weirwood paste. It's probably not really Weirwood seeds that are mashed up like we've been told by the children, because we never really hear about Weirwood seeds. We never really hear about anyone planting Weirwoods. They try in the Vale, but they bring Weirwoods down from the north that are all, it's like replanting a tree that has already grown into a new spot. They aren't growing it from saplings. We've never actually seen Weirwood saplings. The life cycle of a Weirwood tree from when it first grows and to maturity is actually an unknown in the Song of Ice and Fire. So again, that is what makes them like, they're not normal trees. They really aren't. They have more in common with fungus, and it's like a crossbreed. If a mushroom and a tree got together, what would be the result? It's Weirwoods. Protected by our torches, we were immune to the forces of death that were rampant in the dark reaches of the wood beyond our flaring light. But while they could not prey upon our bodies, they drew upon our minds. Pictures of horror, of putridity, and eldritch nightmare thronged our brains. I saw again my comrade as he had lain in his bed over half a year before. I thought of the mountain village and of the 70 victims who had died there in one night. We did not dare, we knew, to dwell on these things. We would go insane. We hastened to collect a pile of dead limbs. We grasped the dank, rotten things, limbs and branches which broke on lifting, or crumbled to dust between our fingers. At last, however, our heap was piled high with the driest, the firmest of them all, and over all we poured a full barrel of kerosene. And as we lit the vast pile and watched the flames roar high and higher, a sigh of pain, sorrow, and impotent rage swelled the field of death. The fire hurts them, I said. While there is fire, they cannot harm us. The forest will burn and they will all die. But will the forest burn? Will they let it burn? They have dimmed the sun. They have even dimmed our torches. See? They should be brighter. Would the forest burn of itself, even if they let it alone? It is damp and rotten and will not burn. See, our fire is burning out. We have failed. Yes, we had failed. We were forced to admit it when, after 2 more trials, we were at last satisfied beyond any doubt that the forest could not be destroyed by fire. All right. So bringing that back. Like I said, when the fight against the others begins, normal conventional methods are going to be the first thing people will try. Sword, steel, fire. But it's not going to work. The White Walkers, the others, will snuff out the flames. The forest will be too wet, too snowy, too icy for fire to burn like that. So, and that is why we need a stronger source of fire if fire is to have any effect. And that's where the dragons come in. Unfortunately for our guys, Art and Fred here, they don't have dragons. They're 2 guys who came here in a truck with kerosene, all right? They're trying to just start a regular forest fire. This is just a simple act of arson, but it's not working. Our hearts had been strong with courage, but now fear haunted us. Cold perspiration flooded our sick, trembling bodies as we sent the clattering truck hurtling up the rocky trail to safety. Our torches flared in the wind and left a black trail of smoke behind us as we fled. But we promised ourselves we would come again. We would bring many men and dynamite. We would find where this thing had its capital and would destroy it. Ooh, okay. So going to the capital of the thing and destroying it with dynamite, that's almost that we could think of that as the idea of going to the heart of winter, finding whatever the hell it is that's laying out there. Black Coffin. If you go back to my Black Coffin stream, no, but I do think that what lays at the heart of winter is going to be something akin to that, something that serves the same narrative purpose as the Black Coffin does. But yeah, going to the heart of winter and destroying what lays there is the idea. That's like going to the White Walker capital, right? And destroying whatever it is that's giving them life, that's giving them power. And we tried, but again, we failed. There were no more deaths. Even the most obstinate moved from the stricken country when spring came and revealed the actual presence of the deadly circle. No one could doubt the mute testimony of the dead and dying trees that fell in its grip. 50, 100, or 200 feet in a night the circle spread. Trees that one day were fresh and alive, sprouting with shoots of green, were the next day harsh and yellow. The death never retreated. It advanced during the nights, held its ground during the day, and at night again the fearful march continued. A condition of terror prevailed over the populations in adjoining districts. The newspapers carried in their columns nothing but blasted hopes. They contained long descriptions of each new advance, long technical theories of the scientists assembled at the front of battle, but no hope. We pointed this out to the terror-ridden people, told them that in our idea lay the only chance of victory. We outlined to them our plan, pleaded for assistance. But no, they said. The plague is spreading. Began in the wood, but it is out of the wood now. How would it help to burn the wood now? The world is doomed. Come with us and live while you can. We must all die. No, there was no one willing to listen to our plan. And so we went north, where the death, through its unfamiliarity and remoteness, had not yet disrupted the society. Here the people, doubtful, hesitant, yet had faith in their men of science, still preserved order, and continued in industry. But our idea received no welcome. We trust the doctors, they said, and none would come. Fred, I told him, we have not yet failed. We will equip a large truck. No, we will take a tractor, a huge machine that will run even through the forest. We will do as we said, take more kerosene and dynamite. We will destroy it yet. It was our last chance. We knew that. If we failed now, the world was indeed doomed. And we knew that every day the death grew stronger, and we worked fast to meet it. The materials we needed, we hauled overland in the truck. More torches, dynamite, 8 barrels of kerosene. We even took 2 guns. And then we loaded all these in an improvised trailer behind the Caterpillar and started out. The wood was dark now, although it was not yet midday when we entered. Black as a well at midnight was the forest. Our torches sent their flickering red a scant 20 feet through the obstinate murk. And through the shivering darkness, there reached our ears a vast murmur, as of 1,000,000 hives of bees. How we chose a path, I do not know. I tried to steer toward the loudest part of the roar, hoping that by doing so we would find the scourge itself of the source itself of the scourge. And our going was not difficult. The tractor laid down its endless track, crushing the paste beneath it, the dank, rotten wood which littered the forest floor. We're making weirwood paste. And from behind, over the smooth track crushed through the forest, lumbered the heavy trailer. The gaunt, scarred trees, shorn of every limb, stood around us like weird sentinels pointing the way. And, if possible, the scene grew more desolate the farther we proceeded. The creaking trunks standing pole-like seemed more and more rotten, the odor of death around us, not the sickening odor of decay, but the less noxious yet more penetrating smell of rottenness complete grew even more piercing. And it called and drew. From out of the darkness it crept into our brains, moved them, changed them to do its will. We did not know. We only knew that the odor around us no longer nauseated. It became the sweetest of perfume to our nostrils. We only knew that the fungus-like trees pleased our eyes, seemed to fill and satisfy some long-hidden aesthetic need. So yeah, bringing back both to Weirwood Paste and Shade of the Evening. So both of those things, right? At first taste, they're both terrible. But as you drink more or eat more, the tastes become more pleasant. They become more palatable, and then pleasant and sweet and all of the things that people like. We see that with Danny, and we see that with when Danny drinks Shade of the Evening in the House of the Undying, and when Bran eats the Weirwood Paste. It's something that we don't see with Victarion. He spits out the Shade of the Evening the moment he tastes it. And then Aeron, the damp hair, Euron forces it down his throat. He only gets the sickly taste of it, the taste of like rotten meat, rotten flesh, until he starts having his acid trip in the Forsaken. We only knew that the fungus-like trees pleased our eyes, seemed to fill and satisfy some long-hidden aesthetic need. In my mind, there grew a picture of a perfect world. Damp, decayed vegetation and succulent flesh, rotting flesh, upon which to feed. Over all the earth, it seemed this picture extended, and I shouted aloud in ecstasy. All right, so yeah. So it's trying to make them think that death, rot, decay, that is actually the picture perfect world. And that could be the picture perfect world to something like the others, who, at least from the stories that were told, only want to kill and bring death and decay and all of that to bring everlasting winter and to kill all things with warmth in their blood. At the half involuntary shout, something flashed upon me, and I knew that these thoughts were not my own, but were foisted upon me from without. With a shriek, I reached to the torch above and bathed my arms in the living flame. I grasped the taper from its setting and brandished it in my comrade's face. The cleansing pain raced through my veins and nerves. The picture faded. The longing passed away. I was myself again. If only we had obeyed the call, gone forth into the shrilling forest. Yet, always after that, we could feel the obscene mind toying with ours, trying still to bend us to its purpose. And I shuddered when I recalled that those thoughts could well have been those of a worm. Yeah, because what's the perfect world for a worm? Nothing but rotting and decay, everything for us to eat. What would be the perfect world for a weirwood, the roots of which are drinking blood? The perfect world for a weirwood would be endless sacrifice, endless food, endless resources, endless things for the roots to drink, to eat, to take from. Then, suddenly, above the roar from without and the steady beat of our engine, we heard a human chant. I idled the motor, jerked out the gears. Clear on our ears it smote now, a chant in a familiar yet strangely altered tongue. Life. In this region of death? It was impossible. The chant ceased, and the hum among the poles of trees doubled in intensity. Someone or something rose to declaim. I strained my ears to hear, but it was unnecessary. Clear and loud through the noisome darkness rose its high semi-chant. Mighty is our Lord the Worm. Mightier than all the kings of heaven and of earth is the worm. The gods create, man plans and builds, but the worm effaces their handiwork. Mighty are the planners and the builders, great their works and their possessions, but at last they must fall heir to a narrow plot of earth, and even that, forsooth, the worm will take away. This is the house of the worm, his home which none may destroy, the home which we, his protectors, have made for him. O Master, on bended knee we give thee all these things. We give unto thee man and his possessions. We give unto thee the life of the earth to be thy morsel of food. We give unto thee the earth itself to be thy residence. Mighty, oh mighty above all the kings of heaven of earth is our Lord and Master, the worm, to whom time is not. All right, so wordplay, right? George does this in the story where worms, W-O-R-M, also can be a stand-in for worm, W-Y-R-M. And it becomes another word for dragon, right? So House of the Worm becomes House of the Worm, aka House of the Dragon. And that is the thing. Like the Weirwoods, right, are referred to as worms. Their roots. There's a lot of Weirwood a lot of symbolism of the Weirwood roots being referred to as worms. But dragons, for their part, also have that worm wordplay symbolism imagery. Bloodraven is the worm that gnaws. So too is the worm that gnaws underneath the tree of Yggdrasil. And the Bloodraven is a dragon, symbolically, because he's half Targaryen. And he is a white worm. Symbolically, his personal sigil is a white dragon. House Veerwell is a white worm. Well, really, they're a white wyvern. But again, the white worm wordplay, where worm is a stand-in for dragon. And then in Lovecraft, we have Idya, who is the worm that gnaws, but she is a cosmic worm, a giant yugya, as I said, who bores through stars and planets. That's how massive she is. And she becomes the mother to the star spawn of Cthulhu. And Cthulhu in A Song of Ice and Fire is the drowned god. The drowned god is a stand-in for Cthulhu. So it's like the drowned god mates with the worm that gnaws at the tree of life, at the roots of the tree of life, and births, and from them come the star spawn. So again, like I feel like again, you follow the trail of breadcrumbs, right? George is a gardener writer. He's out there tossing all these seeds around and seeing what grows, and some of it doesn't. Some of these seeds get eaten by birds, but the things that grow, you can see, and just in that, these seeds are like a trail of breadcrumbs, and you can follow them back to the stories of his youth, the stories of his contemporaries, people that he liked growing up, that he read as a kid, that he read as a teenager, other writers that he worked with when he was a young man, writers that he continues to work with to this day, even as an old man. Their influences are there, and the seeds are that trail of breadcrumbs. You just follow it, go back to these older stories, but you can see the ideas and how he has implemented them, taken them, crafted them into his own, reworked them, and incorporated them into his own story. But it's by reading these older tales, these Lovecraft stories from the 30s, by reading the Zothic Legend Cycle and Titus Crow stories from the 60s and 70s, by reading things like Elric of Melniboné and other stories from the Carcosa mythos, all the way through the 80s and even the early 90s, that from people that George respects or has worked with or is personal friends with, the influences are there. You can see them, and you can kind of see the way that they are driving his own story. It's themes. Themes are important, okay? They are not for 8th grade book reports, no matter what some hack TV writer tells you. Themes are important. And themes, tropes, parallels, influences, all important. And again, George wears all of that on his sleeve. And it's amazing. It's so much fun to pick out where he's getting find where he's getting these ideas from, and then go back and read those for yourself. And you're just like, oh, I see what you did, old man. I see you. And here it is. And again, like I said, 1,000 Worlds in the House of the Worm is George's story, and it is a sequel to this story. So influential was this tale. So influential that it is included in the Cthulhu Mythos, even though it wasn't meant to be part of it. The shared themes, the shared world, the shared ideas grants it a honorary place in the mythos itself. Sick with horror and repulsion, Fred and I exchanged glances. There was life. God knew what sort, but life and human. Then, there in that forest of hell, with the odor, sight, and sound of death around us, we smiled. I swear we smiled. We were given a chance to fight something tangible. I raced the motor, snapped the machine into gear, and pushed on. And 100 feet farther, I stopped, for we were upon the worshippers. 100 of them there were, crouching and kneeling, yes, even wallowing in the putrefaction and filth around them. And the sounds, the cries to which they gave vent as our flaming torches smote full upon their sightless, staring eyes. Only a madman could recall and place upon the printed page the litanies of hate and terror which they flung into our faces. There are vocal qualities peculiar to men and vocal qualities peculiar to beasts, but nowhere this side of the pit of hell can be heard the raucous cries that issued from their straining throats as we grasped our tapers and raced toward them. A few moments only did they stand defiantly in our way. The pain of the unaccustomed light was too much for their sensitive eyes. With shrill shouts of terror, they turned and fled, and we looked about us upon the weltering filth which we were surrounded, and smiled again. For we saw their idol, not an idol of wood or stone or of any clean, normal thing. It was a heaped-up grave, massive, 20 feet long and half as high. It was covered with rotting bones and limbs of trees. The earth, piled there in the gruesome mound, shivered and heaved as from some foul life within. Then, half buried in filth, we saw the headstone, itself a rotting board, leaning askew in its shallow setting, and on it was carved only the line, "The House of the Worm." The House of the Worm, a heaped-up grave, and the cult of blackness and death had sought to make of the world one foul grave, and to cover even that with a shroud of darkness. All right, cool. So this is even more credence to my idea that what lays at the heart of winter, right, is something akin to the black coffin of Lovecraft. a heaped up grave, right, rotting, but shriveled and heaved, but with the trees surrounding it. Massive, 20 feet high, covered with rotting bones and limbs of trees. And this could be the grave of Azor Ahai. If Azor Ahai slips into the Weirwood net, right? And maybe not a grave. We think of the children that Bran sees in Bloodraven's cave, the older ones. They're sort of in a state of cryostasis almost. They've merged with the roots of the weirwood trees, become one with it, and they're there they're like dead but dreaming, which is another Cthulhu thing. In his house in Ryla, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. The children of forest, same thing. They've become one with the weirwood roots, become one with the weirwood net. They are dead but dreaming. And when Bran looks upon them, one of them opens its eyes, and it's unclear whether it sees him or if this is just kind of a bodily spasm, just a thought, just a reflex. That's the word, a reflex. But still, the idea is there. But if Azor Ahai does the same thing, enters the Weirwood net, and he becomes sort of what Bloodraven is currently now, someone who gets taken over through the trees. And that becomes that is, again, the overarching Lovecraftian theme of this whole thing, is that when you try to grasp these higher powers, You do not get them. You do not get the power. The power overtakes you. I've said it's what I think is going to happen with Euron when he reaches too high and gets steamrolled by whatever Lovecraftian eldritch horror is waiting out beyond the veil. We're not going to see it on page. We're never going to see literal gods on page, but we feel their presence. Euron, mind snatch, mind warp, mind melt, whatever you want to call it, body snatch. Even Bloodraven. I've long since held the idea that Bran is going to be body snatched by Bloodraven. That King Bran at the end, it's actually going to be King. It's not going. It's Brynden Stark theory that King Bran is actually going to be Bloodraven, wearing Bran's skin and face. Just an idea I have. I'm not married to the idea, so if it doesn't happen, I won't be sad. If it turns out Bloodraven is actually doing his best and not secret bad guy, but we've seen him and his whole ends justify the means and things before, so it's an idea to keep in mind, but still. But anyway, the idea I'm getting at, though, is Azor Ahai tries to become one with the Weirwood net, then the idea that the Weirwood net actually overtakes him, right? That becomes the idea. That is the overarching idea. So, what lays at the heart of winter? If it is the corpse of Azor Ahai wrapped up in roots, in worm-like roots, like he becomes like a life battery. It's almost like the Matrix, where people are used as batteries. It's a life food for this gigantic Weirwood net, but still, his invasion still had consequences. Even if the Weirwood overtakes him and he doesn't get what he really, really wants, it still does. Just the sheer act of doing it, the defiance, the abomination of becoming one with the Weirwood net, though it doesn't go his way and actually bites him in the ass, still has the other side effect of pushing out the others, the spirits of the trees, and they want it back. So maybe, really, it could be an exorcism of the Weirwood net. That's really what's needed. Azor, if we think of the Weirwood net in computer terms again, Azor Ahai is like a virus. If this video was sponsored, this would be the part where I do maybe a VPN ad or something for McAfee. I don't know. But still, yeah, computer terms. Azor Ahai is a computer virus, and he has screwed up the Weirwood net. And the others are lost, corrupted files at this point. All right, so. The House of the Worm, a heaped up grave, and the cult of blackness and death had sought to make of the world one foul grave, and to cover even that with a shroud of darkness. Yes, now is the time with the grave and the charnel pits. With a shriek of rage, I stamped my foot upon the earth piled there. The crust was thin, so thin that it broke through and nearly precipitated me headlong into the pit itself. Only a violent wrench backward prevented me from falling into the pitching mass of worms. White, wriggling, the things squirmed there under our blood-red flaring light, writhed with agony and the exquisite torture brought to them by the presence of cleansing flame. The House of the Worm, indeed. Sick with loathing, we worked madly. The roar of the alien forest had risen to a howl, an eldritch gibber which sang in our ears and drew at our brains as we toiled. We lit more torches, bathed our hands in the flame, and then, in defiance of the malign will, we demolished the quivering heap of earth which had mocked the form of a grave. We carried barrel after barrel of fuel and poured it upon the squirming things which were already spreading out, rolling like an ocean of filth at our very feet. And then, forgetting the machine which is to take us to safety, I hurled the box of black powder upon them, watched it sink through the mass until out of sight, then applied the torch and fled. Art! The tractor! The rest of the oil! We need to light our way out! I laughed insanely and ran on. 100 yards away, we stopped and watched the spectacle. The flames, leaping 50 feet in air, illumined the forest around us, pushed back the thick, unnatural gloom into the heavy darkness behind us. Unseen voices that howled madly and mouthed hysterical gibberish tore our very souls in their wild pleading. So tangible were they that we felt them pull at our bodies, sway them back and forth with the unholy dance of the rocking trees. From the pit of foulness where the flames danced brightest, a dense cloud of yellow smoke arose. A vast frying sound shrilled through the wood, was echoed back upon us by the blackness around. The tractor was enveloped in flames, the last barrel of oil spouting fire. And then there came a deep, heavy-throated roar. The pulpy ground beneath our feet waved and shook, the roaring flames impaled by an irresistible force. Beneath them rose simultaneously into air, carved out in long sweeping parabolas of lurid flame, and scattered over the moaning forest floor, the powder. The house of the worm was destroyed, and simultaneously with its destruction, the howling voices around us died into a heavy-throated whisper of silence. All right, so this whole scene, right? This is like the burning of the House of the Undying. When what are their names? The really, really blue ones with the heart. Hold on, let's consult the wiki. I can't believe I am blanking on their names. Who does Danny burn in the House of the Undying? I'm sorry, chat. The Undying. Oh my god, it was right. The Undying ones. Okay. Yeah. This scene is a lot like when Danny and Drogon burn the Undying ones. Because the burning of the Undying ones is like a prelude to burning of the others. It is the long night writ small. The symbolism we're supposed to get of the Undying ones and how Danny and Drogon handle that. It is like a precursor to how we can envision attempts, at the very least, against the others. And here it works because the Undying, unlike the others, they were weaker. Their blue heart is broken. Drogon, even as still a pretty little dragon at this point, still a juvenile, I guess we could call him. Not a baby dragon, not a little baby dragon anymore, but a juvenile. He's not big enough to ride yet, but he is enough to kill the Undying one. So, your name leaves a lot to be desired, Undying ones, because you went up like paper the way that the House of the Worm went down so easily. Fred and Art Danny takes care of the Undying ones with her little dragon. Fred and Art take care of the House of the Worm with a truck and some dynamite and some kerosene. If you're right about Bloodraven, do you think it have anything to do with his albinism? I think he'd hate that he was albino. So Bloodraven's albinism is interesting. I mean, one, it plays into the Weirwood symbolism: white skin, white hair, red eyes, albinism. It makes him look like a Weirwood. But yes, it is also a thing that is used against him. And as it would in the time setting that Game of Thrones takes place. Like, that is why we get, lines like cripples, bastards, and broken things. People like Bran, people like Jon, even though Jon's probably a shrewdborn, but Jon as a bastard, or Ramsay Snow, who as a bastard, Daenerys as a woman, Bloodraven as with his albinism, Hodor with as someone who has a mental deficiency. Well, not if what happens on the show ends up being true, but still, there are people like Aegon Frey and mental deficiencies. These are people who in this time period would be looked down upon. Tyrion as a dwarf, they were never meant to have the type of power that they do. It was seen as an insult for someone like Tyrion to inherit, which is why Tywin has such a visceral. Hi, Damon. Okay, let me just widen the screen real quick so everybody can see Damon. Turn around, Damon. Come on, let everyone see your face. Oh, he mad. He big mad. Okay. Yes, Damon. You choose when you can be seen. Anyway, yeah. So Bloodraven's albinism, it might be something that he, in the beginning, definitely self-conscious about. It is, again, it's used against him. It's used as an insult against him. But so too are all the other things about him. Oh, he's a bastard. He's a sorcerer. He's a kinslayer. Like, so I think that Bloodraven, as he grew and matured, probably his albinism probably becomes something that he embraces, actually. Think of like the line Tyrion tells Jon, like, no, you're a bastard. They're like, but accept it, embrace it, wear it like an armor, because the world's not going to let you forget. Same with Bloodraven. Wear these things. It's also why Bloodraven too, like after he loses his eye, right? He doesn't wear an eye patch. He doesn't do a comb over it. He lets that empty socket stare out into the world. Like, he doesn't seem like he's self-conscious about it. The only time he's if he's wearing an eye patch, it's probably more so for hygienic reasons, because you don't want dust and debris getting to your open eye socket. But for the most part, he lets people see it. And it becomes, because too, it's dominating in a way to see that, that puts the fear in you to see his empty eye socket and then his red eye and all of that. Same thing too, like his birthmark. He's not really making any effort to cover that. He shows the world. He shows the world what they would view as deficiencies. So no, I do think he embraces it. But thank you. Good questions. Worms to me mostly represent death, and a song of, and the blood. Oh, the worms to me mostly represent death. I'm sorry. I'm just going back into the chat to see what I missed, because I know you guys do. You guys do say cool things. Chat is smart. I'll always say chat is always smart. The worms mostly represent death, and the bloodworm, I think, is the linking of the vampires and the hive mind control. Yeah, that too. Bloodworm. And it's also, bloodworm, bloodworms, worms eating blood. It's, death, decay. All of that is linked. There is others have a huge vampirism motif, but also, like you said, hive mind. And it's something that, we need to see more of the others. George has said we're going to see Winds of Winter will go farther north. We don't know how the others really go about in their own thing. Like, is there other society? Is there, or how the hive mind works? Is it like the Borg? Are there White Walker cities? like how I had talked about when Art says we'll destroy their capital, and how the Heart of Winter could be like White Walker capital. Is there White Walker society? Maybe. But we don't know. It's an unknown unknown. We'll have to wait and see. All right, so the House of the Worm was destroyed, and simultaneously with its destruction and howling voices around us died into a heavy-throated whisper of silence. The black mist of darkness above and about shook for a moment like a sable silk, caught gropingly at us, then rolled back over the ruined trees and revealed the sun. The sun, bright in all his noonday glory, burst out full above us, warming our hearts with a golden glow. "See, Art," my companion whispered, "the forest is burning. There is nothing now to stop it, and everything will be destroyed." It was true. From 1,000 tiny places, flames were rising and spreading, sending queer little creepers of flame to explore for further progress. The fire, scattered by the explosion, was taking root. We turned. We walked swiftly into the breath of the warm south wind which swept down upon us. We left the growing fire at our backs and moved on. Cool guys don't look at explosions. Keep going and they walk away. A half hour later, after we had covered some 2 miles of fallen forest and odorous wasteland, we paused to look back. Oh, never mind. Cool guys, not cool guys. They're looking back. The fire had spread over the full width of the valley and was roaring northward. I thought of the 50 refugees who had fled, also to the north. Poor devils, I said, but no doubt they are already dead. They could not endure for long the brightness of the sun. And so ends our story, what is perhaps the greatest single menace that has ever threatened mankind. Science pondered, but could make nothing of it. In fact, it was long before we could evolve our explanations satisfactory even to ourselves. We had searched vainly through every known reference book on the occult when an old magazine suddenly gave us the clue. It recalled to our minds a half-forgotten conversation which has been reproduced at the beginning of this narrative. In some way, this cult of the worm must have organized for the worship of death and established their headquarters there in the valley. They built the huge grave as a shrine, and by the over-concentration upon a worship of the fanatical minds, caused a physical manifestation to appear within it as the real result of their thought. And what suggestion of death could be more forceful than its eternal accompaniment, the worms of death and the bacteria of decay? Perhaps their task was lessened by the fact that death is always a reality and does not need so great a concentration of will to produce. It's inevitable, death and taxes. At any rate, from that beginning, that center, they radiated thought waves strong enough to bring their influence over the region where they were active. And as they grew stronger and stronger, and as their minds grew more and more powerful through the fierce mental concentration, they spread out and even destroyed itself. Perhaps they received many recruits, also, to strengthen their ranks, as we ourselves nearly succumbed. Perhaps, too, the land once conquered was watched over by the spirits invoked to their control, so that no further strength on their part was required to maintain it. That would explain the weird noises heard from all parts of the forest, which persisted even after the worshippers themselves had fled. And as to their final destruction, I quote a line from the old volume where we first read of the theory. If this be true, the only way to destroy it is to cease to believe. When the mock grave, their great fetish, was destroyed, the central bonds which held their system together were broken. Oh, hey, where does power reside? It resides where men believe it resides. Hey, there's that great riddle coming from the spider. Only here it's with the cult, the worms. The strong belief is what makes it true. And when the worshippers themselves perished in the flames, all possibility of a recurrence of the terror died with them. But is it? This is our only explanation and our belief. But Fred and I do not wish to engage in scientific debate. We only wish an opportunity to forget the chaotic experience which has disrupted our lives. Reward? We had our reward in the destruction of the vile thing we fought. Yet to that satisfaction, an appreciative world has addled its wealth in its favor. These things we are thankful for and enjoy. What man does not? But we feel that not in adulation, nor yet in pleasure lies our ultimate recovery. We must work, must forget the experience only by assiduous toil. We are stamping the horror, if not from our minds, at least from our immediate consciousness. In time, perhaps. And yet, we cannot entirely forget. Only this morning, while walking in the fields, I came across the dead carcass of a wild beast lying in a furrow, and in its thin, decaying body was another life, a nauseous alien life of putrescence and decay. All right, yep, and that is the end of the story. Okay. Ooh. So, thank you. That was House of the Worm by Mearle Prout. Definitely can see the influence that it's had on George and that it had on other writers, that it had on Lovecraft after him. Again, this is 1933. Lovecraft would continue pumping out more tales till his death. You can see why it's included in the mythos. And yeah, it's right. Death is inevitable. And just because this first time was stamped out does not mean that it can't rise again. As we see with the Long Night, the others were never defeated. They went away. They went in hibernation, but they're coming again. Something's bringing them back. The Long Night, just because it happened once doesn't mean and ended doesn't mean it can't happen again. This is history. History doesn't always repeat, but it does rhyme. And sometimes it rhymes so much to the points of plagiarism, almost in that respect. But it's the parallels, it's the themes and the parallels and the foils that are important. And these are the things that, that I love to gravitate towards. Dave gives you the symbolism, and I'm learning, not as good as him, but I'm learning. But the parallels and the foils, those are my bread and butter, okay? That's what I love doing, and that's why taking this, noting these themes that George is drawing upon and relating them back to the original tales, whether they're Lovecraft or Lovecraftian, like this was. They're the fun. They're the Easter eggs I love looking for. So, yeah, that was House of the Worm. I would suggest going on, checking out more weird tales. Perhaps checking and read George's earlier writings from the 70s. Again, I said he is drawing upon his own older work, does lay a foundation for where the story is going, just as much as these stories that influenced him lay a foundation and give an idea of where the story is going. So his sequel to this, In the House of the Worm, is part of the Thousand Worlds what's the word? Universe, I guess. Thousand Worlds universe. Yeah. But it's the shared story universe. But Fever Dream, Ice Dragon, Night Flyers, A Song for Laya. Yeah. Those are all things that George wrote that have that give ideas as to where his story is going. But again, Lovecraft, Howard, The Tales of Kull, Out of the Aeons, Shadow over Innsmouth. Here we go. House of the Worm, Zothic Legend Cycle again. These are all things that have humongous influence on George, and he weaves them into a story, gives them a good tip of the hat to them, but makes them his own. And it's fun drawing upon them and seeing where the original tales came from and what we can draw from them and the connections we can make. Yes, worm, dragon, worm, wyvern. It's the fun wordplay. The worm is a stand-in. Yes, so thank you for joining me. That's about little over 2 hours. That wrapped. Good. We wrapped it up pretty nicely for a stream. So I'll be back again with Zothic Legend Cycle. Again, plan to cover all 5 stories plus the prequel. After that, we're going to look at more weird tales. There is more that Carter wrote. Might look into Titus Crow and those stories. Definitely going to do some Poe and some Robert E. Howard, and we're definitely going to do Carcosa Mythos. I have done my first stream. I did read some King and Yellow stories, but those were broken up like this was. They were broken up into discussions and the influence that they've had, but a straight read through, at least of In the Court of the Dragon, it would be a good one to do. So keep out on lookout for that in the future. And then, of course, this is all building up to Guarded by Squishers. And that is all then building up to even further the crown jewel after party when everything's said and done. When I've got that and Dave has Moat Kalen and his Ironborn videos out of the way, Squisher Iceberg. So he's doing Stark Iceberg tomorrow, but Squisher Iceberg is going to be fun on the bun. That's going to be me with him on that one, and God, I can't wait to to talk everyone's ear off about Deep Ones and all this Lovecraft stuff. And yeah, the Squisher armies, World War Squisher. These are things that these are things that I will bring up. The Turtle Wars in the Rhoynar, and the Valyrian Freehold. Why isn't Super Chat enabled? Okay, so in order to gain Super Chats, you need to have two things. YouTube requires you to have two things. First, you need over 1,000 subscribers, which I've hit. You also need 4,000 hours of watched time videos, which I have not reached. I'm treading around 3,000. So I need more subscribers and more people watching my videos to amount to a time that will get to 4,000 hours. Then I can enable Super Chats, which will be very fun if I can do. I would love to be able to enable Super Chats. Now, here's the thing. I'm doing these for fun. Like, my audience is not as big. I have a real person job that I actually enjoy, that pays the bills and gives me health care and benefits and all that. So for me, Super Chats are not a necessity. It'd be nice. It'd be cool if I get those, but I'm going to treat those more as a tip jar than anything. I'm not gonna rely on them. I don't see YouTube. I want YouTube to remain a hobby. I don't want it to become a career, because then you are at the mercy of the algorithm. Like what I'm doing with Zothic Legend Cycle, right? It's a niche thing. Nobody's really heard. A lot of people haven't heard of Zothic Legend Cycle. That's why there are no audiobooks for it. But because I am not beholden to the algorithm, that gives me the freedom to do these more obscure stories, because I'm not reliant on YouTube to pay my bills. That's the upside to it. The downside to it is I also don't have a normal schedule the way Dave does, where you could expect him every Sunday to do a stream, where you can expect videos maybe a couple of times a month. I don't have that sort of schedule. I do these when I have time to do them, when I have time to get away and feel like doing them. That's also why I keep jumping in time when I start. I was trying to find a good time on Saturdays because I also don't want to step on other people's toes, but going 9 o'clock Eastern is way too late. 4 o'clock Eastern, I don't know of any. I know there's a streamer who goes at 2, or it used to at least. And I think there's one at 6. I do have PayPal. Maybe I can, you know what, for the next stream I do, I will drop a link to my PayPal if people want to send in me questions, or if you want to float a couple bucks my way, I'm very appreciative of it. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone who wants me to get to the point where I can get super chats. I feel loved that people are willing to pay to hear what I have to say. Yeah, but I am going to treat those more like tips than anything. Don't feel like you need to send me a super chat or a PayPal, but I appreciate the thought. I appreciate the support. But I'm small time, and I'm probably always I probably will always be small time, and I'm fine with being small time. Dave's on that 100K creep though, and I'm glad to see that. I hope he gets to there. I hope he gets there, and then he'll get that silver medal thing I think that YouTubers get, and maybe he'll hang that on the wall. But yeah, but definitely come for Squish Your Iceberg. I'll happily answer every question people send for that, and for there you're getting like, you know, you sort of get a 2 for the price of 1 with super chats and PayPals on that type of thing. But I think I've rambled enough. But yeah, those are the hidden inner workings of how YouTube monetizes your content. And I also drop too many F-bombs when I'm left on my own to really be monetized anyway. I don't think Disney or anyone's going to want to be placing any ads over my videos. But hey, a few extra bucks is that's more treats for Damon. That's more food for Brody and Chloe. That goes to puppies and kitties. Okay, so actually, let me go get him quick, because we're gonna sign out. So let's get Damon on camera. Damon, the people like to see you, Damon. The people like to see you. So here he is. Here's Damon. He's so handsome. Yeah, not happy. He was sleeping on the couch, and I disturbed him. So happy. Damon, love your head scratches. Okay. So for me and Damon, thank you for joining us, and have a good night. Check out Stark Iceberg tomorrow with Dave. And I will be back to, when I have time, recording next Zothic Legend Cycle. Out of the Ages will be the next story. And until then, goodbye.